Today we'll be working on lesson 3.5, Introduction to Factoring Quadratics, and I'm going to be working on this page with you. This lesson we're going to be factoring. So basically when I say factoring, I mean try to rewrite this in factor form. It means at the end you have to end up with two different factors in parentheses. Now as you can see, how many terms do we have over here? I have two terms which are 24x and 48y. If I have two terms or three terms, your first step is always to try to find what's common between 24x and 48y. So you need to find the greatest common factor, or simply we say GCF. So let's start with the numbers 24 and 48. What's common between them? They're both even. But look guys, if you try to multiply 24 times 2, you're going to get 48. So then 48 is 24 times 2. So as you can see, I have a 24 in common. So I'm going to take 24 outside of the parentheses, take it as a common factor. So what's going to be left of 24x if you factor 24 out? You're going to be only left with an x. What's going to be left of the 48 if you factor 24 out? You know that 24 times 2 would give you 48. So then what's going to be left is 2. Now, and don't forget to copy the y down. So let's make sure that I did it right. To double check, you can try to FOIL or distribute the 24. 24 times x is 24x. 24 times 2y is 48y. So then my factoring out did work. The common, or the GCF, the greatest common factor, is 24. Now can you factor this more? No, there's nothing else in common. X is different from y. This has a 2, this does not have a 2. So I did factor it completely, and my two factors are 24 and x plus 2y. Okay? So my two factors are 24 and x plus 2y. This is going to be the final answer. Now let's move on to the next one. How many terms do you see over here? 9x squared minus 6x. As you can see, I have two terms. Every single time I try to factor, you have to think of it that the first step is always going to be to find a greatest common factor. So let's look at them. Let's start with the numbers, 9 and 6. What's common between 9 and 6? 9 is 3 times 3. 6 is 3 times 2. So as you can see, there's a 3 in common. So I'm going to factor the 3 out. Okay. Now let's look at the x. How many x's do you have over here? Here you have x to the power 2, so x and x. And this is only 1x, so I only have one x in common, so I'm going to factor x out. So what's going to be left of 9 if you factor 3 out? You're only going to end up with a 3 because 3 times 3 is a 9. What's going to be left of the x squared if you factor x out? So think about it. X times what would give you x squared? Only x. Okay? So if you factor 3x out of the 9x squared, you're going to be left with 3x only. Don't forget to put the minus between them and think about it. If you have 6x and you're factoring 3x out, so as you can see the x is gone, it's factored out. What about the 6? If you factor 3 out, you're going to be left with a 2. To double check, try to distribute. 3 times 3 is a 9, and x times x is an x squared. So 3x times 3x is 9x squared. We're good. 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. We're good too. Can you factor this more? There's nothing else in common. They're both primes. This has an x, this does not have an x. So that's going to be my final factoring. So this is how you factor if you have two terms. Now let's see how we factor if we have three terms. You always start with the first step. Try to find a greatest common factor. Let's see if we have anything in common. Now this is a 2, this is a 10, and this is a 12. As you can see, they're all even. So 2 should be in common. Now let's look at the variables now. This is x to the third, this is x to the second, this is x. So this has x, 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 this has x and x, this only has one x. So there's only one x in common. So if I have 2x to the third and I factor 2x out, I'm going to be left with x to the second, because like x and x to the second would give you x to the third. Now, if I have 10x squared and I factor 2x out, think about it. 2 times what would give you 10? It's 5. X times what would give you x squared? It's x. Don't forget the plus. Now, 2x times what would give you 12x? As you can see, the x is factored out. So 2 times what would give you 12? 6. So as you can see, the greatest common factor is 2x. Now, the second step that you need to move on to is you need to look inside the parentheses. Okay? Now, if you look inside the parentheses, don't I have an x to the second power? And I still have 3 terms in here. So there's a possibility I can still factor this more. So I'm going to take x to the second plus 5x plus 6 and try to factor this on my own. Now, how can we do that? Now remember, a is the number in front of the x square, b is the number in front of the x, and c is the constant. In this case, a is 1, b is 5, and c is 6. Now, since a is 1, this is something that I can do mentally. I can try to factor it mentally. How can I do that? You have to think of 2 numbers that would multiply to give you 6 and add to give you 5. So think of 2 numbers. When you multiply them, you get 6. And when you add them, you get 5. So basically, when you multiply, you get the third term, and when you add, you get the middle term. Now, if you think that this is hard for you to find, take the 6 on the side and think, what multiplies to give you 6? I can think of 6 and 1. 6 times 1 is 6. But when I add 6 and 1, is it going to give me 5? Is it going to give me the middle term? No. So that is not a possibility. Think of another 2 numbers. When you multiply, you get 6. 3 and 2. 3 times 2 is 6. Now let's try to add them. 3 plus 2 gave me 5, which is the middle term. So 3 and 2 are my numbers. Look, 3 times 2 is 6. 3 plus 2 is 5. Then to factor this, you say that the 2 factors are x plus 3, because 3 is one of the numbers, and x plus 2, because 2 is one of the numbers as well. So what is my final answer then? Don't forget that you factored 2x out, so you copy 2x, and I just found that my 2 factors are x plus 3, and x plus 2. So that is my final answer. So when you have 3 terms, remember, if you have 3 terms inside the parentheses, it means probably you need to check if you can simplify or factor this more. Now, if a is 1, then this is something you can do mentally. You have to think of 2 numbers that would multiply to give you this and add to give you this. Once you find the numbers, these are going to be your 2 factors. You just put an x in front of it, and that's the 2 factors. Now, to check if your answer is right, you go to y equals, and you put the major one that they gave you, the original one. So I'm going to put 2x to the third. I need to make sure that my answer is right. So to the power 3. Now move over, plus 10x squared plus 12x. And I'm going to move on to y2. Now remember, since I have color, you can go back and make this bold to make sure that the 2 graphs are similar. And I'm going to put the factored form that I just found. So 2x, open parentheses, x plus 3. You always need to check your work. You don't want to do all the work and then because of one small mistake, you will have the whole problem wrong. So always double check your answer. Okay? Move this out of the way. Okay? So you see that? Now I'm going to graph it and let's see what we're going to see. We have the blue one is going to be my graph, and now the red one should be overlapping the blue one. So let's see. What happened? Oh yeah, there you go. It did overlap it. So my answer is correct. See that? So then I did it right. Now let's move on to another problem. Okay? Now what I want you to do is I want you to copy a question that's similar to this one and do it. I'm going to check it tomorrow in class. So the question is, x squared minus 12x plus 25. Please do this, and I'm going to check it. So this is going to be similar to the one we did earlier. And I'm going to give you one that's similar to the first two, which is this one. Go ahead and do it, just to double check that you get the video. Now I'm going to be doing, remove the whole thing. Okay. Now, how can we do something like this? Now remember, your first step always is to try to find a GCF. Okay, now I want you to focus on this because most of the problems are going to be similar to this one. Okay, so a GCF, what's common? So as you can see, they're both all even. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to think of a number that goes into 18, 48, and 32. Probably it's a 2. So what's going to be left of the 18 if I factor 2 out? 2 times what gives you 18? 9. And I'm going to copy x to the second. What's going to be left of 48 if I factor 2 out? 24. What's going to be left of 32 if I factor 2 out? 16. Okay, so as you can see, 2 is the GCF, the greatest common factor. Now look at the whatever you have inside the parentheses. As you can see, there are 3 terms, and I have an x to the second. It means probably I can factor this one more. So I'm going to copy it on the side and try to factor it more. Now it's the same concept. You need to find 2 numbers that would multiply to give you something and would add to give you something. So let's see. But in this case, think, what is A, what is B, and what's C? A is 9, it's not 1. It's B, it's negative 24, and the C is 16. Since A is not 1, what you need to do, and that's the difference between a problem like that and the one we did earlier, is that you have to multiply A times C. So 9 times 16. So if A is not 1, you have to multiply it by 16. And that's going to give you your AC. So what's AC? 9 times 16? 144. So your AC is 144. And what's your B? Negative 24. So it's just like we did earlier. You have to find 2 numbers when you multiply, you get, but this time, not 16 like we did earlier. It was this number because A was 1. So then what you multiply to get 16. But since A is not 1, you have to multiply it by 16. And then you have to find 2 numbers that would multiply to give you 144. And would add to give you the middle term, which is in this case, negative 24. So it's always something that would add up to the middle term, whether A is 1 or not. So it's always something that would add up to give you the middle. Okay? Let me go back so you don't get confused. If A is 1, okay, so you need 2 numbers that would multiply to give you this number and add to give you the middle number, okay? If A is not 1, you still need to find something that would add up to the middle number always. It doesn't change. But this time, you want them to multiply to give you these 2 multiplied together, so 144. So you need to make sure that to pay attention whether A is 1 or not. Now, as you can see, 144 is a big number, right? So I'm going to teach you something that you can use on the calculator to help you solve something like that and find the numbers, okay? So on your calculator, you go to Y and you try to put whenever AC is over X. Now, when you multiply When you multiplied AC, what did you get? 144. So it's 144 over x. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to y, and you're going to put, I'm going to clear this, and you're going to put 144, so alpha y equals, to have a fraction, press enter, alpha y equals, remember that, 144 on the top of the fraction, as you can see I'm going to put 144. So 144, and then on the bottom of the fraction I'm going to have an x. So remember, AC over x, whenever A and C multiply to give you 144. And then you go to second table. Now what you need to do is that your table is going to give you different numbers. You try to look for the whole numbers, not the fractions. You need those two numbers that would add to give you what? In this case, negative 24. So keep looking. 1 plus 144 is 145, so that's not it. You want it to add to give you negative 24. So keep looking. 2 plus 72, 74. 3 plus 48, 51. So probably, let me try to go to the negative. Negative 2 and negative 72. No, the reason why I'm thinking of the negative is because it's in negative 24. So let me keep looking. Negative 8 and negative 18, it's like negative 26. I'm getting closer. Negative 9, negative 16, that's like, no, it's not negative 24. So you see that? You try to look for the whole numbers. If it's a fraction or a decimal, just skip it. Okay? Oh, there you go. Negative 12 and negative 12. How much is that? It is negative 24. So then the two numbers that I need are negative 12 and negative 12. These are my two numbers. Negative 12 and negative 12. I just found them. Okay? Now, once you find them, you do the box method to continue factoring, and most of you learned this in Algebra 1. So let me move on to the box method. Now, you can watch this video again if you need to review what we did, okay? So the box method. So draw a box, okay? Most of you learned this in Algebra 1 and Math Models, okay? So what is your first term? Remember, you want the one that's here, not 18x squared, because you factored 2 out. You want this one. What's your first term? 9x squared. So I'm going to put this in my first box. Okay? What's the last term? 16. I'm going to put this in my last box. Okay? So you move the first one, you put it in the first box, and you put the 16 in the last box. And didn't you just find two numbers that would add up to give you the negative 24? So the 9x squared, you copy it. The 16, you copy it. The middle one, you try to split it to the two numbers you just found. You just found negative 12 and negative 12. So you put negative 12x and negative 12x. So instead of the negative 24, we put negative 12x and negative 12x because we found them to be negative 12, okay? Now, where do I go from here? Now, what you need to do is you need to look at those two numbers and try to find a GCF like we did before. So 9x squared and negative 12x, what's in common? As you can see, 3 goes into both of them, so that's going to be my first term that I'm going to take on the outside. I can see that there's an x also in common. So see, there's an x squared and x, so x is in common. As you can see, 9 and negative 12, there's a 3 in common between them. So I'm going to put 3x on the outside. Now let's look over here. What's common between negative 12x and 16? They're both even. Now 12, 4 goes into 12 and 4 goes into 16. So 4 is my common number, okay? Now, let's move on and do it vertically now. What's common between 9x squared and negative 12x? I just did it over here. What did I get the common? 3x. So I'm going to put 3x over here. And again, what's common between negative 12x and 16? I just did it over here, so it's 4. Okay? Now, however, since you see that there's a negative common between those two, so I'm going to put a negative 4 here and a negative 4 over here. Okay? Then my two factors, as you can see, are going to be the ones on the top and on the side of your box. Then my factors are 3x minus 4 and 3x minus 4. Okay? Now don't forget that you factored 2 out from the beginning, so I'm going to put it over here, and that would be my final answer. Now I want you to watch the video again, and we're going to do more practice like this in class. Now I'm going to give you an example that I want you to try on your own, okay? Move the whole thing. So remember I gave you 1 and 2, now I'm going to add the number 3, and the question I want you to try is 3x squared plus 4x plus 1. And again, we're going to do these in class, okay?